It's May the 6th and it's easily the warmest day of the year. We're back in the homeland of South East London and we're heading towards Brockley Cemetery. We're going to have a good walk around the cemetery and film it as well. Brockley Cemetery was opened in 1858 and it was joined with Ladywell Cemetery, and it's about half a mile away from Nunhead Cemetery, which is one of the Magnificent Seven. In an earlier vlog back in February of this year, we visited West Norwood, another one of the Magnificent Seven. I'm just loving the look of this cemetery. It's wild, slightly unkempt, but it's none the worse for that. As with all these London cemeteries, it's a real time capsule and a way of finding out about the past. And in this cemetery, it's no different. You can really get a great insight into Deptford's seafaring history. Generally, people like to know who's buried here, the good, the bad, and the famous. And I'll go through a list of some of the people who are buried here. There's Joseph Henry Blackburn, who dominated the English chess scene in the late 19th century. You also have Sir George Grove, first director of the Royal College of Music in 1882. We have a poet, Ernest Dowson, and a marine engineer, William Eames. And I'll continue. There's a Fernando Clarido del Marmol, and I probably got that pronunciation completely wrong, who was a Cuban anarchist writer. There's an English racing cyclist and pioneer of British cycling, George Lacey Hillier. And we have a couple of other interesting characters. Joe Bowker, who was an English boxer who was bantamweight champion of the world. And one of my favourite burials here, lastly, is E.H. Windred, who died in 1953 and was famous for being a painter of racing pigeons. I wonder if this is some undiscovered gem. We eulogise about the Magnificent Seven, and rightly so. As I said earlier, we've got Nunhead less than half a mile away, but this really is quite a magnificent cemetery, and I wondered if we should be talking about the Magnificent Eight. But then I'd be unfair, because I'm sure there's many magnificent cemeteries in London that I haven't yet discovered, so we'll leave that argument for a later date. But please let me know what you think in the comments. But I do think this is a magnificent place. I guess it helps that it's a really warm summer's day. We've had a relatively mild spring, flowers are out, everything's lush and green and verdant. We saw that during the Victorian era and the 19th century, that the population of London exploded from about 1 million to 7 million in the year 1900. Now you had this increasing population, rapidly increasing population, and you had very high mortality rates. We saw the Industrial Revolution in full flow, people living in very poor conditions, overcrowded, sanitation was very poor, often illnesses and diseases were rife. Now with the increased mortality, it became very difficult for local churchyards to deal with this problem. And we explained in the West Norwood Cemetery video of a few months back the horrors of Enham Chapel, all those pressures of burying the large increasing number of people. Now we saw the rise of the Magnificent Seven and other cemeteries in order to facilitate this increase in mortality. If you're interested in the natural habitat, I'll go to the plant list of the Friends of Brockley Cemetery, and I'll use the common names of some of the plants here. So walking around the cemetery, you're likely to see things like yarrow, for example, wild onion, garlic, mustard, black horehound, and the dale cress, cow parsley, scarlet pimpernel, cuckoo flower, and shepherd's purse. Brockley Cemetery contains war graves from World War I and World War II, and these war graves are registered and maintained by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, a very noble organisation. Now, the cemetery here contains 195 war graves. The majority of those are from World War I, and the graves line a war plot on the cemetery's west side. Before us we can see a screen wall with a memorial list of those graves that could not be marked by headstones. We see before us on the information board details about civilian deaths in the Deptford area during World War I. We weren't intending initially today to come to Brockley Cemetery, and it was a slight detour for us to come here, but I'm glad we did. It was a wonderful place, and often the real gems of these walks is these undiscovered places that you find when maybe you take a slight detour from your planned route, and we certainly didn't intend to come here, but I think it's really made the day that we did, and I hope you can share in that as well. We revere these places in respect for the dead, but they've really become a haven for wildlife. And we've talked about the plant list already, but we've seen a lot of animal life here as well. And they really are the lungs of London, as well as the great parks that we see everywhere. And they help soften a landscape with the high rises of London, increasingly dominated by concrete, glass and steel. We're now on the famous Lewisham Way heading into Deptford. We're now down to two, it's just myself and Cass. Steve, who has a problem with Stratford High Street, is now running scared of South East London and has retreated back to his Surrey mansion. We will soon be coming up to the famous Goldsmiths College. It's good to see some political activism in this area. It's good that people can express themselves in this way, and it's good we live in a country that allows it as well. We've now arrived at the doorsteps of the famous Goldsmiths College. This site has been a place of learning for over 200 years. In 1792, the County Academy opened its doors in a house built by the Deptford distiller William Goodhue. The Royal Naval School then bought the site, building what is now the Richard Hockett building in 1843. The Worshipful Company of Goldsmiths acquired the school and reopened it in 1891 as the Goldsmiths Company Technical and Recreative Institute. With the dawn of the 20th century, the company handed over the institute to the University of London and it was rechristened Goldsmiths College. Famous alumni of the college include the fashion designer Vivienne Westwood, the singer John Cale from the Velvet Underground, Princess Beatrice, and the famous comedian Rick Reeves or Jim Muir. A community mural can be seen on the side of the Rutherford building depicting the Battle of Lewisham 1977. The Battle of Lewisham took place on the 13th of August 1977 when 500 members of the far-right National Front attempted to march from New Cross to Lewisham, and there were various counter demonstrations by between about 4,000 and 5,000 people that led to violent clashes between the two groups. There is a plaque in nearby New Cross commemorating the Battle of Lewisham and the thousands who united here to fight the evils of racism and fascism. Famous people of Deptford. Well, it might be worth reading a novel by Anthony Burgess called A Dead Man of Deptford. It depicts the life and character of Christopher Marlowe, a renowned playwright of the Tudor period, who was meant to reputedly have written some of Shakespeare's plays. But apparently he was killed in a tavern brawl in Deptford, though there is some debate about that story. Apparently he was a spy for Walsingham during the period of Queen Elizabeth I. Marlowe was instrumental in finding out the perpetrators of a plot to kill Elizabeth, and that led to the execution of Elizabeth's rival, Mary Queen of Scots. One final thought before the conclusion of the walk. Does capitalism make you mad? I'll let you decide. Please let me know your comments. A big thanks to the people who have watched this video from the Anglian Flaneurs, and our next walk will be down the Old Kent Road.